And we are here. What is up, little man, little brother Heath?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. So we had decided, since we just kind of hopped off a three-way with the Jordy, that we were going to do a podcast episode, which was going to be like this long podcast episode, but we decided to condense it down to a little topic so that way we could have you back on in the future. And so we were discussing kind of what we would talk about. And yeah, so Heath, how are you?
Doing well. It's Saturday. It's like I've worked out. I read my Bible today. I cooked breakfast, ate lunch. Like, it's been a good day.
It is a good day. Today's a good day. So that's that's for me. Something's like, today is the best day to be alive. I mean, that's what we have today. So, anyways. Oh, you got me. So, anyways, we're getting ice cream after this podcast with Heath. She's going to be here in just a little bit. So, after this podcast. Hey, turn that off. All right. So you guys need to be quiet, all right? Cool.
Cool.
I'll probably just cut that all out. So you guys can be quiet. That's fine. It's waiting for this charging. So can you guys be quiet, just like you guys are when I'm usually on my other podcast? Here. Go upstairs and watch something for a little bit. See you later, alligators. All right. I'm gonna put my hands up like this. That'll be my cutting point. So, all right. So we're gonna restart this whole thing. Heath, my little brother. What's up, man?
Hale, one of my older brothers.
One of your older brothers. What's it like to be the youngest?
It's great. I got whatever I wanted. That's not true.
That's not true. There's no way that's true.
The reason I didn't get a lot of everything I wanted was because all of your mistakes. Then I got stricter rules.
I don't agree with that.
I was such a good kid. I was such a good kid growing up.
I mean, and look where it got you. Same place as I am, and I was an asshole.
Dad, what's your number?
Are we in the same place?
Yeah.
Dad, what's your number?
3652. No, we're always in different places. So,
right.
Well, today we are going to talk about a topic that I think you and I are going to enjoy talking about. I know I'm curious to learn about it. I think anytime we can get closer to one another and understand just humans, not even siblings, as long as we can understand people's journeys and their paths a little bit, especially about some of those harder topics, or what would be called harder topics, that it just brings us closer. And I think more people being closer to understanding people's pains and stories, I think we can create more wonderfulness and goodness in the world. So yeah, man. So let's jump into it.
All right.
So you're Heath. You're my youngest brother. To give people some context, give some people some context about who you are and your age and stuff that, so they know who you are a little bit.
Yeah. So, like I said, I am the youngest of 5 in our family, kind of by quite a bit of an age gap. You're the closest to me, and you're 5 years older than I am. So a little bit of an age gap. So I always joke with Mom that I was, an accident, but she's always like, no, you were never an accident. I was like, okay, Mom. Yeah, so I always, I am the youngest. I am 24 right now. I just finished up my master's in higher education administration. I live here in the state of Florida. I'm not going to say the great state or anything like that because I have no allegiance to Florida or anything like that. Excuse me. But yeah, kind of left the nest a little bit. and kind of away from the family, which is definitely something different. Haven't seen anybody since Christmas. And so that's always really interesting too, because, you know, how do you, when you can't be around all these people and stuff like that, you learn to adapt and kind of do things like this, like Zoom calls and all that fun stuff. So yeah, I kind of left the nest, and I definitely am thankful for the experiences that I've gained after doing so, because it's definitely been an interesting 2 years since I left Ohio. It's actually almost in about a week. It'll be, I don't know why I looked at a watch that I don't have, but in about 9 days-ish, 2 years ago, I left to move down to the South. And so
that's what people do when they're like being an asshole, and they're like, oh, look at the time, I gotta go, right? They look at their non-existent watch on their wrist, and they're like, oh yeah, I gotta go.
Yeah, I look at it for like dates, and I'm like, dates, like I will go like, oh, the 20, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I guess Apple, I don't know, I've never had an Apple Watch, but I'm sure there's some watches out there that have some stuff out there. So
right.
But you adapting to leaving the nest, there's a lot to that. I don't think a lot of people get out of their comfort zones and go do that. And I think you have to learn to adapt when you go throw yourself in there. It's kind of like, you know, the old story of Grandpa throwing you in the pool. Not that that happened to either one of us, but it would have been Dad if anything. But you know, it's kind of like that whole thing. You know, jumping into the deep end and sinking or swimming and trying to figure it out. So kudos to you for figuring it out, I think.
Well, still trying to figure it out, but getting there.
So today, because we were on the phone with brother Jordy for a little bit and talking around, we decided to have a little bit shorter of a podcast episode between you and I, and then we decided to pick a topic, which is something new for the Kill Marker podcast. We haven't really, I haven't picked with a guest kind of like a topic, and so today is coming out and self-acceptance. So this is self-acceptance I can talk about. And coming out, I probably could talk about, but in a different manner than what we would be talking about with you. And so we want to dive deep in that because I am curious about the story and the experiences of that, because I know that it would be a difficult thing. And when you talk about adapting and talk about anxiety and self-acceptance, I think sharing stories, what I've found on here is just sharing stories is just what we attach to. That's why people go to the movies, right? The best movies are the best stories. And stories are what we talk about and share with people. And that stories change people's lives, so, and save people's lives. So that is what we're going to do. So I just have all kinds of questions about this, but I'll kind of say, hey, like, tell me this, like, how it began. Like, I'll start with a question. Like, when did you know?
All right. So that's a very interesting question in its own right, just because when you do kind of like fully understand it, then you notice everything that you looked at prior to that time of understanding, like, oh, maybe I'm not straight, or maybe I'm not interested in only me being a cis male. If I am, maybe I'm not only attracted to females, or maybe I'm not attracted to females at all. So that was definitely interesting. It definitely happened in high school sometime. I definitely denied it a lot, even. To myself at least. I would be like, this is like, that's not me, was talking and definitely interested in a woman my sophomore year of high school. Loved her to death. She's great. Didn't work out. Totally fine. And then about junior years when I really started getting close to someone in that more relationship aspect. And I even remember saying that, like, if I kiss this person, then that like makes me gay or makes me whatever. And so that was something that I struggled with a lot, was even just like that. But like cuddling or sleeping together and like whatnot, staying the night at their house, like I'm like, the physical stuff's there, but it's like, oh, I'm not kissing you. That's like, the kissing thing was like, oh, that makes me gay or whatnot. And so, but after that finally happened, and then we kind of like began our relationship in between my junior and senior year, that's when I was like more accepting of like, okay, this is something that is what it is. And I started dating a man, and obviously it was in secret for a while because neither of us were out to anybody, or talk to anybody about that process. And so kind of putting a pin there, like I said, reflecting back on that, I could remember thinking like, oh, this celebrity is attractive to me, like, or there was like, I don't know, you would just see how you actually looked at people and the way you looked at people, and you're like, oh, I realized, okay, I was in 7th grade and I was checking this person out, and that's, at the time I didn't necessarily notice it, but now I can think back to those times and things like that. And so I think that's really interesting to think about and look at. Kind of fast forwarding into between my junior and senior year, so that would have been 2013, was dating an individual. We were like kind of labeled as like best friends, we were in show choir together. He was 2 years older than I was, and kind of things progressed. We hung out a lot throughout senior year. We were hanging out together all the time. And that's when I kind of started, I guess, a journey of like acceptance in that. I wouldn't say that that is even now fully accomplished, because it's always an ongoing thing. So that's kind of when I would say I knew, was probably senior year of high school, of like actually officially understanding and knowing, oh, this was, I'm not straight. I'm not into only women or whatnot or something like that. And so that's kind of where that lies.
I was gonna say there's quite a bit to unpack in there. And one, I want to say thank you for coming on here. And to preface this to like the people who do listen to this, is that you and I have never had this conversation before. This is the first conversation for us. And so, you know, I'm happy to be in this place where we have technology to do this. We have the space to do this. We have the ability to record this and share this with other people. And it, you know, we're siblings. I'm a straight guy, and you're gay. And like, it's like, I think this conversation has a lot of value. So I want to say thank you for doing that, because it's not always easy.
Right.
And definitely it's not as accepted in where we grew up and our society as whole, right? So much has changed just in the last decade with these types of things. So it's definitely an interesting time, although it seems to be more accepted now culturally in most areas than it was even senior year for you, right? And before that. So I just want to say thank you. And then when I asked the question, you said, I asked the question is, when did you know? You're like, well, as I look back, I can see how it would lead up to that. But when you really knew was probably when you had that identification. It seems like senior year, it wasn't just like you knew senior year, but it was almost something that you admitted to yourself, like, okay, I'm going to take the ignorance glasses off, I guess, and say, okay, this is what I am. I'm interested in, and maybe the audience, air quotes, thinks I would be, or thinks this is interesting too, is like kissing a guy. Kissing a guy makes you gay, right? Not cuddling or being attracted to them, but you had in your head, it was like, kissing a guy makes me gay.
That was like, that's what made it real. It was like, this solidifies something that like is like, oh wow, this, and it's like, if I do this and I enjoy it, then like, then I have to like officially, I don't have to say you don't have to officially do that. Sexuality is a spectrum, but like saying, oh, now this is real. This is something that I am into, and this is something that I like and enjoy. And so I think just like when people have those like hidden secrets of the things that they thoroughly enjoy, it's like, oh, I am a huge blank nerd, but I can't tell anybody because everyone's gonna think I'm super weird or something like that. And so I think it kind of is similar to that. It was like, oh, like I am now admitting that this is real. And I think your analogy saying like the ignorance glasses, I think that's actually something really interesting to say, because it is like that realization and like taking back my own little ignorance and scared outlook on that, to like take that layer off and actually look at it for what it is.
And it's interesting with the ignorance classes, because like, you know, Nicole talks about, she has friends that are gay, and she's like, well, duh, like we knew already, like, and they thought the person that she was like, yeah, we know you're gay. Like, hey, I'm coming out. They're like, yeah. And Nicole would be like, yeah, I know. Was there people who were around? And that's what I mean by ignorance glasses is like sometimes, and I forget who I was listening to, was it a podcast or a book, but it's when we think we're fooling other people, in reality, we're fooling ourselves, that people already see us for who we are. It's just a matter of time before we see us for who we are. And so I think that's kind of like a good two-word quote is ignorance glasses. But something there that you said too was like, and my question about it is, were you afraid to be gay? Like were you in your mind like kissing makes this real, and if this makes this real and I like it, were you more afraid that like you were something that was probably at that time not in I don't know if the word encouraged or accepted, like were you afraid to be gay would be my question.
Yeah, definitely. So in a little bit comes from me of not wanting to fit into the stereotype of what a like a gay man looks like or something like that. Like I didn't want to fit into that like stereotype. Well, you obviously know, but people listening don't know that like I was in theater, I was in choir, I was a varsity athlete, I was involved in like every single club. I went to sporting events at my school. I had a large group of like a really good group of friends that we hung out all the time. And all that stuff. So there were definitely some aspects of that I would fit into the stereotype because probably the biggest thing I was involved with was my choir and the music and stuff that I did through that. Probably the most time spent doing that and all of that. And so I didn't want to like, oh, I'm fitting into the stereotype that like only, or like if you're a male into music and into theater and stuff like that, you're more likely to be gay or something like that, and that's not necessarily true. And so I think my thing comes out of like, oh, that's something I don't want to fit into that stereotype. But then there's a whole nother caveat of that of I grew up feeling, and it took me a very, very long time to eradicate this from my thoughts, even still not even gone, but I had this huge desire to be the perfect kid, like the perfect like person. So like I never drank in high school, I never did any drugs, I've never smoked anything, I didn't cuss, I was a top scholar, I was in the top of my class, I was involved, I had a good group of friends who didn't do those things either. I was involved in everything. I was always an officer in a club that I was in, like either vice president or president, or striving to just be the best at everything I can be, and ideally like perfect. And that's not possible. And that's something that stuck with me all the way through college and my undergrad. And even still to this day, there's still like remnants of like, that's something that I need to do. And I need to be this like perfect person or perfect kid. When I'm
Where does that come from?
Yeah. I think that all stems, I think it's a expectational aspect for myself, but I think it stems from childhood too, of the way that we grew up, and I feel like we definitely grew up in a spot where it was a lot more criticism than praise for the things that you did. And so it was a lot more like, oh, you did a great job, but you could have done this a little bit better or something like that. And so me trying to always perfect everything that I did and being the best at whatever I was doing was always something in the forefront of my mind, and trying to do that or trying to appease somebody. I was also kind of, if you say like the ugly duckling of the family when you look at the things that I was into versus all of my siblings. Growing up, everyone was in sports, nobody was really into the theater and music and stuff like that. And so had I been totally fine with only doing that stuff, I may not have done sports at all. I feel like I potentially did sports to appease what the family look was. And obviously I didn't do the same sports that you guys did. I did not do basketball, I didn't do football, I didn't do baseball. At points in my life I did, but I was a runner. That's kind of where I got my involvement, and that was kind of where that was. So I definitely think that stems from just kind of growing up in a space where I was the outcast of what everybody else in the family kind of looks like. And so that, and then also, like I said, it was always like, oh, you could do this a little bit better mentality, which I am very thankful for in its own right, because I welcome constructive criticism. I always go, whenever I have a meeting with my boss, I'm almost always like, what am I doing wrong, or what can I do better? Just because I want to know how to improve. And I think that's maybe some people growing up don't always get that criticism or something like that, to be ready to take that going forward in their lives.
That's interesting, because when I asked like what perfect kid would be, I wrote down like it's perfect is kind of a slippery slope. Like what is this vision of perfect coming from anyways? Because I mean, not only is it's a slippery slope, it's a sliding scale in and of itself, right? Like perfect is, it could be that you become an engineer, or you have a 4.5 GPA or 5.0 GPA, whatever, or you're fluent in something. Like perfect is such this elusive thing, and it's a moving target that you had this baseline that's where you really were chasing, and that you had to be a perfect kid. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing is like you didn't want to. So we were talking about how you were afraid to be gay, and you didn't want to fit into the stereotype of that. It's like, and that makes me feel like you were having. We're talking about self-acceptance in this, and it almost feels like there's self-rejection in the process of going through junior high. I mean, maybe it's more just like late teens, more like 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 is right. More self, I guess, rejection. It was just like, I reject this part of me. I'm not this person. I'm not going to be this person. And because if I'm this person, then I'm also this person, this person, this person. I.e., if I fit the stereotype and I'm gay, that means I'm all these other things too. And so it was kind of like all or nothing type of thing.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And so, and now, like looking back at that, I know that like this sexuality and gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation, all of that is such a spectrum on its own right. And so, understanding all of that back then is so hard to grasp. And even now, looking into things that are being made and the shows that I'm watching, and I think now even I am so much more interested in like teen dramas and stuff like that, because they're becoming more inclusive of things like that. And so it's nice to see. Whereas the movie Love, Simon, that came out in 2017 or 2018, one of my favorite movies, but it's because it has the story of like kind of what coming out looks like, and how you can have supportive friends, or how you can have this and this, and that like cute little love story or whatnot. And then looking into building off of that, they just released Love, Victor, which is a spin-off show based on that. And it's not like it's back when I was that age, had there been shows and representation of that out, you would feel so much more comfortable in being able to relate to those characters. Whereas right now, like thinking back to the shows and things that I was watching, the gay characters out and about was like Glee, and the most prominent character in that was Chris Colfer's character Kurt, who was written to fill like almost all of those stereotypes. And so you only see them stereotypically, whereas now you see people who don't fit those stereotypes, because that's not what it is. It is a spectrum. And so like back then it's like, oh, if I admit to this, then I am like, oh, I am like either very feminine, or I am very... I was going to say flamboyant is like Will and Grace. I don't remember the characters on Will and Grace, but you're right. It was definitely portrayed as this like one way, right? It was this blatantly obvious, different voice, different dress, different mannerisms, which are all true, right? Like there is a difference to the way we carry ourselves, even as individuals, just whatever. But they were so exaggerated that
it almost to you was like, that's not, if I'm gay, but I'm not that. So what am I? Was that the question? Like, well, what am I?
Yeah, and I think it stems from definitely a lot of like understanding the spectrum and understanding what does that look like. There are very, very, very masculine gay men out there that aren't flamboyant or aren't very feminine or basically are what an ideal straight person is, but they just are also interested in the same sex versus something else. And so like you have all of these things to kind of look at, and it's hard when you don't have the ability to see all of that. Like you said, like when you see that a gay person has to be flamboyant or has to be feminine or has to be super well dressed or something like that, like that's just not true. That's not the case, because there are gay people, and like it's not a choice to do that or be gay or attracted to the same sex. It's not a choice. It's something that is a part of who you are, and so your personality doesn't necessarily change, and the way you grow up and the stories that you hear and the way that you live your life are very different, and everyone kind of accepts that. But what media had previously portrayed before they really within the last 5 years that gay marriage became illegal, representation was always stereotypical. And so
legal, not illegal, right?
Legal, yes, legal.
So when you were 17, 18, obviously, so now you're starting to have these realizations. You're in a relationship. It's all secretive. You haven't come out yet. Like, tell me about all of the stuff at that point in time. Tell me, like, what was going through your head, and like, here's the thing. Like for me, I think coming out is something more people need to do, and I don't mean it in a sexuality standpoint. What I mean is that, like, and tell me if I'm off here, but there is a certain liberation to coming out, right? Because you are this person in two different worlds. One where you get to be who you are, and the other where you have to cover up who you are. And when you cover up who you are, it sets false expectations. It is a burden in the back of your mind. Do they know? Do they not know? What if I get caught? Like all these thoughts that are like enslaving, the human. And so I think, I think how difficult the coming out stage is, and that's what we're going to talk about, is still on the other side of that is liberation. And I think when I say I wish more people would come out, I don't mean sexually. I mean, I wish for myself, and what that means is like, I wish I was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, like my whole life, more willing to be genuine and authentic to who I was in situations, and air quotes, quote unquote, come out and break those false barriers, whether they were my own and they were my own ignorance classes, or if those were the beliefs that I had kind of put and instilled in others by the way I behaved. So my question to you is like, walk me through the storyline of the thoughts in your head pre-coming out, like what was that like, and then the actual part of coming out, and then kind of what you experienced as far as self-acceptance coming through that.
Yeah. So kind of starting off of like thoughts ahead of time, so we kind of chatted about this, like I didn't want it to be real, I didn't want to fit these stereotypes, or I didn't want to be looked at this way because this is part of who I am. And so that was super, super difficult. And at the time too, I was also really getting into my faith and my religion and stuff like that. And so being a part of a church also has something that is a whole nother caveat of what does that look like, being someone part of the LGBTQI community, and also being religious, and how does it mold into that. And so that was very difficult too. Like I can't come out and then be rejected from this portion of my life, or be rejected from these people. That's stressful. And so kind of my journey was taking it slow. Like I talked to friends, like my super close friends and friends that were mutual friends between me and my partner at the time. I had come out to my cousin who was, I had come out to Danny. Danny knew, had come out to my friend Paige, come out to my friend Jen.
What did they say that they knew? Did they say that they like? Tell me some of these conversations, like how they went, and I'm curious to know.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, that's what now? 7 years ago. I'm getting old. But yeah, so I think I'm trying to think of who the first person was. I feel like it actually might have been my friend Paige, and so at the time, her and I were both in the same youth group. She was part of my group of friends. We were class officers together. Blah blah blah. So we were hanging out quite often, and actually, I think my partner and I at the time were on a break or we were fighting, had gotten to a big fight, and I just really needed to talk to somebody about it. And there was no one to talk to because nobody knew that we were together. And so she kind of got that blunt. And I remember talking to her on the phone, kind of pacing in my room about it back home. And so that just kind of stumbled upon there. I think Jen and Danny, I think we both told them together, and we were just like, hey, this is a thing. And it was weird because some of my best friends at the time were not the people that I initially told, because I felt I didn't want to let those people down. And so my friend Gina, for instance, she or my friend Seth, two people that I know have zero cares in the world about any of that stuff. I never officially came out to my friend Seth until last Christmas, maybe, or last Thanksgiving. No, not this past Christmas, but the Christmas before. That was the first time I'd ever come out to him. And he is one of those accepting, doesn't care about anything friends that I had at the time. And it's almost harder to talk to those people because it's like, I don't know. It was just super difficult for me to do that. And so that's kind of how that happened. And I found myself talking, letting people know throughout the time, through senior year, through the fall, and going into spring. And then in March, I made a huge mistake and actually outed my partner. And so he had written me a poem or something like that, and had a couple pictures of us up on the corner. And he had given that to me. I think it was March of my senior year, so March 2014. And we went upstairs to go watch a movie or something like that. And then I had left that on the kitchen counter. And we were home alone at the time, and I left it on his kitchen counter, and I left, and his mom saw it and came up to him and dropped it on his kitchen table, and basically he just had to come out on the spot, which is 100% not fair. Super negligent on my part. His family is very religious, and so that was a really, really big thing. And so that's kind of how I kind of got forced into coming out. I wasn't ready to at the time, but me being the person I am, I care so much about other people that I'm not going to, I don't want to hurt other people. That's not my intentions at all. I hate doing it. I hate if I upset somebody or anything like that. I want to know how I can be better and not do that. And so at that time, then that June, he was like, you have to tell your parents, and it's which makes sense because I took that away from him. I took that power away from him. It's not okay for someone to out somebody else, especially the big things like your parents and things like that. So he was with me when I came out to mom and dad, and I remember sitting back in the hallway. They were out, or dad was out in the living room, and at that time, I would say I've always been a mama's boy, but at that time, for some reason, I just felt close to mom, and so I wanted to talk to dad about it first, and so I did. And then we came out, my partner sat with me, and we talked about it, and talked about it with dad. And dad was like, I already knew. He was like, two guys don't spend that much time together, da 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 da, blah blah blah. There were some negative things said at that time.
Like what?
Dad had said, hey, if potentially, he's like, if I saw two guys kiss, I would throw up. That's gross. That's not he's like, that's just not what we grew up with, da 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 da. And so it's
that's what he so his response was that's really hard for me to imagine. That's really hard for me to accept, and it's gross, and it would make me throw up.
He's like, I already knew. He's like, I already knew, but he's like, yeah, I'm like you or you, like whatever, but it's definitely like, it's not something I grew up seeing, not something I'm aware of, or I don't see that. So he said that to us, and that was something I think I blocked out of my memory. But now I remember that being said, and my partner at the time was like, you know, your dad said that, right? And I was like, no, like trying to like defend it or whatnot. And so I feel like I never really had a big coming out moment because I never, and a lot of it now you see people like posting on social media or something like that. And that's just, as much as I like being on stage and like going to parties and doing whatever and having a good time, like I don't really like being the center of attention. And so I never wanted to make that big post. The closest I got to was making a post about my partner my sophomore year of college. So we were still together, and
so instead you just decided to do a podcast.
What?
So instead you just decided to do a podcast.
Right. And so my partner at the time, like I like made a post about him on Instagram, and it never said boyfriend, it never said like partner or like I love you. Like it was like a post about like, hey, we have strong feelings for each other, and then, you know, I would slowly come out. Like we went to college together, and we were actually broken up before we got there, and then we got back together again, and we were off and on for like 3 years from that time. And coming out to our friends, like our close friend group, we came out to them, and it just kind of slowly developed where we became more comfortable. And then we were still a little hesitant sometimes with things around campus or whatnot, like we didn't hold hands on campus or like stuff like that. And that's the whole thing of like people who, it's just an acceptance thing. Like we were at like, Wright State's not a big or not a huge school, but it's also not a small school at all. It's not a private school, it's public school. It's like open and stuff like that. So I don't think we would have really ran into anything. We were both involved on campus too, so people liked us, and it wasn't really that big of a thing, but it's just still like, ooh, do we really want to push these boundaries or whatnot? And so then finally kind of the self-acceptance came a little bit more when we broke up, and I was just like, okay, you know what does this look like? Blah, 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 kind of self-accepting the fact that like I'm no longer with my high school partner. And then I started talking to a couple people here and there, you know, you get on the dating apps and meet new people and stuff like that. And so I had a few flings or whatnot for like a month and a half at a time. So it was definitely really interesting. And then going through college, and then when I finally decided that I was actually going to move down to the South and come to grad school, so I graduated in December after 3.5 years, and I was going to take time off from school. I knew I was going to eventually go back to school, but I didn't know when. I finally got coerced by my really close friend who was already down here in the South, and she was like, yeah, come on down. I told her no 3 times before I officially said yes, and I was like, yeah, no, let's give it a try. And I came down here, and before I left, Dad was like, hey, you know, it's really different down in the South, and was like, hey, like, you know, the LGBTQ community, he like messed up some of the letters and stuff like that, but it was really sentimental actually, for him to care about that aspect of my life that it felt like he had fully accepted at that point, or had accepted so much more than when I officially came out. And so that was honestly a really heartwarming thing for me. Definitely felt, you know, like all fuzzy inside. I was like, oh, that's really sweet. Like, I'm like happy that you said about that.
Yeah, I think, and I've talked about Dad quite a bit on the podcast, is, you know, I feel like sometimes I tell stories about Dad, and I even have to like say like, hey, like I have a great relationship with my dad, and they were always doing the best they can. And like, and sometimes he gets painted, I feel like on my podcast, or just in general, he gets painted as like this asshole all the time, you know, asshole. Well, and he's got that aspect, and he's definitely has a, you know, as a former coach, he's got that people love him or they hate him, and that's a thing. But the thing that you're speaking about, and the reason I wanted to kind of touch on that is because, like, one, from his perspective, I'm assuming is that, you know, there's a couple things. It's like, I don't see Mom and Dad really go out and really grow per se. Like, they're not what I would say they're looking and seeking for uncomfortable situations to grow in. Like they're not really seeking. They're not reading books or going to seminars or anything like that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They like life as it is, and they keep doing life as it is. But in this moment, and there's so much more that is behind the layers of, I think they had a lot of their stress moments and their growth and their growth spurts when they were really young, really forced to be young. So that was a thing. And but like what I kind of admire from the situation, and I can see this out of Dad, is that he does give a lot of shits. Like he cares a whole lot, right? Like it's just what he does. And so for him to, you know, get through that growth for him, because it's different, just different for him, and you grow through that. Not saying it's right or wrong, but taking that part out of it, and then to come back and say like, hey, like I care about you. So like obviously saying sentimental is I can see Dad for that, and I want to just kind of highlight that situation that, you know, we are very fortunate in that regard to have, and he, to this day, he's always talking to me. He's like, and he bases a lot of his conversations off of fear for our pain. And he talks about it. Like, I just want you guys to live a better life than what I live and what I'm living. And, you know, sometimes that gets in the way of our own growth and our own, you know, failures that we need to encounter and endure along the way. But he's definitely a softie and sweetheart, you know, past that shell. So he definitely gives a lot of fucks.
And I think that's changed a lot within the last 6 years. Like since I left high school, Mom, Dad, and I had a big tiff in high school, and talking about.
What do you mean?
Well, I guess I don't know if any of you all know this. So like I left home for a couple weeks, my senior year of high school. And I was living with my partner at the time, who was also just like more of like a friend at the time. And I had this perfect mantra that like I would still at night, I like would drop off my car in the driveway, and then my partner would come and pick me up, and we'd go back to his place. And I was staying there. I stayed there for probably 2 weeks. There was a lot of things going on with Mom and Dad, and it was a little dramatic. I will definitely say it was a little dramatic, but at the same time, I think, like you had mentioned, I was always this perfect kid, and I felt that I was not treated as like this good kid. I had a 10 a.m. or a 10 p.m. curfew where I wasn't allowed to even though like I had not given them any inkling or reason to think that I was going to be doing something wrong. And so I felt that I was treated unfairly for the way and the respect that I gave them. And so that was a really, really big thing. And I was gone for 2 weeks, came back. And I think after that, it was like Dad and I had the conversation of like, do you think we love you less because you're not into sports? Or do you think we love you less because you're not into this? And I was like, yes. And that was a big thing too. Like that was kind of like a big kind of slap in the face of like, I've now grown up in this family where I don't feel as loved as everybody else in the family because of the things that I'm interested in. And so that was like a really big thing. And it was like, Dad was like, you know, I'm not a hugger. Like we didn't grow up hugging each other. Your mom and I, like our like families growing up, we didn't give hugs to everyone, whatnot. But in the last 6 years, what does Dad do all the time now? Says, I love you. When you get off the phone, like he hugs us every time he sees us. And so I'm not saying that is fully attributive to our kind of tiff that we had senior year, but I definitely would like to say it plays a little bit of a role in that.
When was this? Because there was a time, it's curious because I know that I was going through a lot of pain, and I just remember I told them, I told Lindsay and Steph, and I even called Jordan one time. I was like, listen, I don't want to live a life where I don't tell you. I know it was normal. I know it didn't grow up this way, but I'm like, I don't want to live a life. Like I want it. Selfishly, I want to be able to hug and say I love you guys. Like this is something I want to do. I'm an affectionate person. You know, I love you guys. I want to say it. I know that you guys love me, but I need the words. Like that's what I need, and that's what I want. And it took me a while. And even saying on this podcast is a little uncomfortable at times because it sounds like I'm a needy little whiny person who's supposed to be a man and supposed to be tough. But the reality is like whatever the premise of my life, I don't know if premise of my life is the words that I want to say, but it's like, that's just who I am. I want the words of affirmation. And it could be attributed to the fact that, I've reflected on this. It could be attributed to the fact that we always receive criticism. I mean, and not in a bad way. I remember specifically, there's a story when I was in junior high and I was playing, it was a basketball game, and we were in mom and dad's silver Dodge Caravan, and mom was driving and dad was in the front seat, and I just had a junior high basketball game, and I got in the car and he said the same things you did. It's like, hey, you did a good job, but you could have done this different. And I just looked at him and I go, can't you ever just say good job and be done? Like, can you just do that one time? Like, this 13-year-old's little ego who's trying to fit in with all of everything else going on gets sits on my face, trying to, find girls and friends and, like trying to fit in. The last thing I want to do is try to fit in my family too, and he's like, well, I do think you did a good job. And from that moment on, he did give more, affirmation, but we definitely butt heads for a long time. And I think, one thing that, you've yet to experience, but you're an uncle to a lot is, just growing up as now I'm a dad. And so now I get to see it, and they teach me a lot. And so I don't hold dad so accountable anymore as like a little whiny teenage, Kale version, because he was just learning, and he was learning each of us. 5 kids are all different. Like I have 2, and they're extremely different. And so they teach us just as much as dad was there to help us through it. So, but I didn't know that you had moved out. Maybe I did know that. I would have to piece it together. And I kind of want to just, dig into the 2 worlds a little bit, right? Because and we'll get back into self-acceptance, because you talked about, like, it really does seem like, and I think this is important back to what I was talking about earlier, is like, I think more people need to come out. And that's why I want to dive a little bit deeper into living that 2 worlds. And maybe you enjoyed the 2 worlds. Maybe you didn't enjoy the 2 worlds. Like, have you lost friends? Have you, were you upset by that? Like, tell me more about the feelings and the specifics about some of this stuff.
Yeah. So like, I do kind of agree with what you said. Like, it definitely, like, the coming out of like just who you are yourself and instead of trying to hide who you are is definitely a really important thing. And coming to that realization is vital. It's vital to a person's growth. And some people don't hit that until they're 40. Some people don't hit that until they're 60. Like, some people, yeah, like some people never really truly take off the mask of who they feel like they should be and then just start being who they are. And so I think for me, like, it's not fun. I still, have to be kind of cautious about different things. Going back home. Like I said, I have never like officially came out to some of my closest high school friends. And so at this time, I would like to hope that we've been friends now for 10 years, that it's not that big of a deal, or it's not.
But why do you need to be careful?
I don't want to make, like I said, I don't like to hurt anyone. I don't make someone else uncomfortable. So I'm not going to talk about like the partner that I have and stuff like that. So when I went to a wedding last August, I was in a relationship, and he had come home for Christmas with me the year before, came home for Christmas this past year. And at the time, like, I wasn't going, the wedding was a little bit smaller, so I didn't have a +1 anyways, but my friends who had the wedding didn't also know that I was with somebody. And so even if I had been given a +1, I probably would not have brought my partner at that time, because one, weddings are not about me. And so I was going back to Greenville. You know Greenville very well. It's not the most accepting place. So I was not going to make someone feel uncomfortable or make anybody in the wedding uncomfortable. And he was also a person of color. So that is an added stimulus of, now I'm basically coming out at this wedding. So now you're going to see this gay couple at a wedding, and then it's also an interracial couple. That's like a big thing. And I don't want that to be a big to-do, because the wedding is not about me. It's about the 2 people getting married. So like,
yeah, I understand that part. But as far as just like being careful, like, one, like seriously, we're recording this podcast and I'm posting this podcast on my Facebook group. People are gonna, not my Facebook group, but on Facebook and social media and YouTube, it's gonna be out there. So at this point, but what I'm saying is like, because even like as we talked about, it's like, hey, it's the coming out podcast with self-acceptance, and I think both of us are still doing that. Like I actually had a conversation with Nicole last night on the podcast about like, I was watching this show, My Spy Me, whatever I told you we were watching with the kids yesterday. And there's this character, and she's a lady character, and she was on Last Man on Earth too. I can't remember her name for the life of me, but she plays a lot of like goofy, weird characters. And obviously you guys know that I'm a little weird, right? But I don't express that enough side of me because I fear rejection. I fear rejection, and it comes to the point of like, at some point in my life, I don't know if comedy and stand-up comedy is something that I'm going to do or want to do. It's like, but like, I want to be more self-expressive in more situations and give less fuck about what people think about me. And so I'm still moving into this thing, and some of that is just identifying if it's the right shoe that fits, right? Like, so some of it might be a little extreme, some of it might be a little toned back. So it's kind of figuring out where the equalizer fits there for me. But for you into this moving into like self-acceptance, it's like, you know, what are like hearing that I've got to be careful, I just call bullshit. Like, why do you have to be careful? You know, going to somebody's wedding, it's not about you. So it's probably not the time. It's like, I'm the best man, and I just want to let everybody know that I'm gay, and you know, like that wouldn't be the best time to do that, right? Like I get that, but at the same time, it's like, I don't agree with the being careful part.
Yeah. And so and I think what I mean by that is not trying to draw attention or make someone else feel uncomfortable, because I know that not people are ready. I mean, that technically makes me uncomfortable. So really, like, is it myself?
Yeah. And who are you to say that they're not ready? Like, who you know, what gives you the right to say that somebody else isn't ready for the information when you're not even giving them a chance?
Right. Yeah. And so it's like I said, I never really come out. Now that couple at that time, at this now, I don't know if they officially know, but I have mentioned in a group chat with them and some other friends, I had brought my partner to, we all went to Marion's Pizza, that group, or it's kind of split now, but half of that group now, he was not there, but I said, hey, everyone, I'm bringing this person, so be nice to them. And so like, it was out there for everyone to know. And so
the first three people you told though, right, was like your friend Paige, Danny, and somebody else. When you told them, did they say, yeah, I knew, like, or maybe they didn't at the time, but now, like, looking back, you would have a conversation like, yeah, we like, did they know?
I want to say, I don't know actually. I don't remember what exactly their responses were in regards to, hey, we already knew, or da 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 da. I think people were more like, oh, okay, I can see it, or something like that. I don't think anybody was like, oh, okay, I already knew. And I think sometimes that it's almost like that's almost, I don't want to say it's a negative response, but when you are saying like, oh, I already knew, it kind of takes away from it's, I don't say it's like a slap in the face, but it's like, oh, I'm trying to trust you with this very important thing of my life. And for you to be like, oh, I already knew, it kind of dismisses it in a sense.
Okay.
Versus saying, oh, hey, okay. It's like, thank you for telling me. Thank you for feeling comfortable enough to open up to me about it. Whereas that's more saying like, I'm accepting you for who you are, versus being like, okay, I already know, I've accepted you for a while, I don't care. Like, because that's an emotional thing for someone else. Like if you go up to someone and you're like, hey, I have depression or something like that, you don't want someone to be like, oh, I know. You want someone to be like, okay, what does that mean for, like, how can I help you? Thank you for telling me that. It's like some stuff like that. Like you don't want, or like if you're going up and like, you're telling your person like, hey, I'm getting married, or hey, will you be my maid of honor or whatnot? And they're like, I already knew you were going to ask me. Or
yeah, it dismisses it. Yeah, it does.
So that's always something too. And I think we get caught up in these emotions like, oh, I already know, da 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 da. So like, yeah, like I already know, like I'm already accepting, I don't care. It's like, okay, well now don't take away from my moment now, like, because this is something about me, not you. And so like I think that's something to do. So kind of flipping back to telling them, I don't think any of them did that, which was nice. It was just like a okay.
Well,
yeah,
and
cool,
in regard that I'm saying, like, I feel like some of your friends, like you like your friend. I don't think any of your friends, one, I don't think they're going to be they don't need to be your friends if you go and you tell them that you're coming out and then they want to be your friend. Like, yeah, fuck you, people. Like, I don't need you to be my friend at the end of the day.
Right.
So I think that makes sense. So that's kind of like at the point, where I'm in. What is like still a large obstacle for you when it comes to just life in general that, that you're working through right now? What is something?
Yeah, I think for me, in regards to my sexual orientation, I would say under still being accepting and being in an area of like where it's okay to be a little physical with your partner or acknowledge the fact that you are with someone. I was in a relationship that recently that was not that way. It was like we were not affectionate, and I'm not trying to make out with anybody out in public, but like, okay, a kiss on the cheek when like if I'm meeting them out somewhere, excuse me, they're already out, or vice versa, like, oh hey, how are you, hug and a kiss on the cheek or something like that. Like people do that all the time, but when you look at a gay couple, it's like, oh, that's not okay. Like I remember one night, it was at night, we were walking home and not a busy road or anything, and some people drove by, we were holding hands, and someone yelled out faggots outside their door. And for my partner, that was like, all right, we're not doing this anymore. Like I don't want to do that anymore. And so that was that's always difficult too. It's like, how do you still like be accepting of something in yourself and still get so much hate towards it? So I think for me, I've come to accept that a lot more and be more willing to be okay out in public, but it's still something you struggle with because you want to make sure, like if I'm going out to the bars, there's a couple bars here that I probably would not do that, but there are some also other bars that I 100% would, excluding the gay bar, obviously. But there are some like quote unquote straight bars or like stuff like that that's like super chill and cool and great vibes and things like that. And so but then there's also some that you would be a little bit more careful where you are.
Why?
Just because you potentially could run into some of those things of like you could I'm not saying I've seen it happen, but also where I am now, I'm in the South, and so a lot of stuff is repressed. But I don't think I've seen in the bars that I have in my head right now, I don't think I've seen any of my gay friends or gay couples like be affectionate in those specific instances. I've never seen anything like that in some of those bars, just because people are a little bit more cautious about the vibe of people that are there, of like, these are people who are potentially super conservative that don't like gay people, like they're not accepting of it or something like that. And so you just want to be careful because you don't want to run into any issues. Like I don't want someone to come up to me and just start yelling at me and calling me a homo and all of this stuff. I don't want that. Like I'm trying to have a good night out, like da 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 da. And so I think that's kind of where that, from just understanding your surroundings versus like if I go to the gay bar, I can do whatever I want because like I'm in an environment that was built to be safe for me.
That feels like it's a lot of pressure on a relationship too. I mean, obviously, I think there is progress in that area. Not always is it fast enough for us. And there are more and more places, like cities are more accepting in general than. I was actually having a conversation with my neighbor. It's like the city versus rural Ohio. It takes something that's new and it's new in the city and it's scary in the country, and then it becomes normal in the city, and then it becomes new in the country, and then it becomes old in the city, and it becomes normal in the wait, am I saying this? Now I'm getting all sorts of fucked up in my head. But it's like it kind of ripples out, right? And so,
Right.
city is what we would call here more safe place for people who have a sexual orientation as yours. I'm trying to learn the lingo, I guess. And I can imagine, when someone says more repressed and more, it's kind of, it is, I don't want to get on the topic of this, but it's kind of like the white privilege, right? It's almost like a straight privilege, right? Like if you are in a male and female or female and male relationship, it is more accepted and you have a privilege. And the privilege is that you can go into most establishments and show some sort of affection towards one another and not be name called or ridiculed or any other word that would be fitting in this circumstance. That is a privilege. That is something that my relationship gets to easily experience, where with very little resistance. And for you, that comes with resistance. And so that would ultimately, in my opinion, would put some tension in between your relationship that could be unsettling or difficult to move through. So I mean, what would be if like you could have a conversation with these people that would basically driving down the street yelling faggot, what would be a conversation that you could have, or bits of information that you could have for them at all? Like what would be the growth?
Oh gosh.
Besides them just being straight fucks and being like, I mean, the ultimate thing there is like, I don't know if it's cliche. Hurt people. Like people who have confidence, like they don't say that stuff.
Right.
The people who have any bit of reasoning or reflective muscles or emotional intelligence, I don't believe they do that. I believe they have the consideration for other ways of living. So I don't know if it's just the sheer education problem, but I would hand over the microphone to somebody else who's on the other side of that equation and isn't on my side.
Right. Well, kind of touching really quickly back on your privilege comment and kind of little excerpt. I definitely, that's a whole nother video. Willing to jump in on that if you want. But yeah, so I think that the education, it is education, and also just like it starts with the normalization of the negative socialization that has happened within this country. And so you almost want to say like it starts at home, but you can't always say that, because I have learned so much not from mom and dad. I've learned a lot from mom and dad, but I've also learned so much from just my real world experiences, and also getting out from where you are. Like if you live in Greenville, Ohio, your diversity there in a state or a city of 13,000 people that is predominantly white and not very diverse in any aspect, it's hard to see other people. And so, and especially when the media is only portraying a certain type of person to people, how do you learn about other people without going out and meeting new people and things like that? One of the most entertaining things that I did in my master's program, we went to a diversity training, and actually, no, this was with my job while I was working at South Alabama. We went to this diversity training, and someone offered a thing. She said, okay, what, and we were talking about specifically about race or whatnot, but it was, what race is your partner? What race is your best friend? What race is the majority of people in your workplace? What is the majority of your friend group? What is their race? Stuff like that. And you really see like, okay, if I'm me being a white male, look at all that and all of them are white, then it's like, how interesting and how understanding and accepting can I be of other people and things if I don't know or really surround myself with other people who have different opinions and different life experiences than me. Like, so I think that was something interesting. Like at the time, I had a decently diverse workplace, and I work in higher ed, so it's a little bit different too. It tends to be a little bit more diverse, but one of my best friends, she is Black. I was dating a Black man. Like, my supervisor was a man of color, and so you do get to see all of these different cultures and experiences and learn about this from other people. So really, the only way to do it is to go out and meet new people and be willing to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, especially, again, it could be a whole video caveat or whatnot, but with everything going on with police brutality and things like that, because of the privilege that I have as a white male, I don't have to experience that. So my questions then go to my Black friends, asking them, hey, like, what is something I can do as an ally for you? Because then you get into this white savior complex where it's like, oh, this is what needs to happen. But it's like, no, we need to listen to the people who it's actually affecting. And not just saying like, oh, this is what we need to do. That's not how that works. So I asked them saying, hey, is this something that you're comfortable with? Or is this something that, like, if I were to share this or if I were to post about this, like, are you okay with that? Are you supportive of that? And is that something that you want me to do? And if not, then I'm not going to. If it's not my place, then that's fine, because it's not about me. So I think that's kind of where it is. Like I said, all in all, just education and meeting new people and willing to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think it's kind of funny because I don't know. I think it was before this when you were on with Jordy, is just talking about you were going to go travel and like gives you anxiety and makes you uncomfortable. To go travel, and it's like, but reality is like that type of stress is a positive stress. To go put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and to look and say, how can I be in this experience, although it be uncomfortable, and have an outcome that is progressively positive, right? Like, I think the biggest thing is putting yourself into situations around other people. And I know for myself, going and traveling other places has definitely opened my eyes. Just being in a city, it's opened my eyes. Coming from like, even on your like, I think it's so easy to say, well, who are the people you go out in your town with, and who lives in your house, and what, like, and who's in your family, like. But the other thing is like, who do you follow on social media, right? Like, are all of your friends predominantly the same color and same beliefs as you? I'm not saying you need to go surround yourself with people who are all opposite of you. What I'm saying is that I think you're exactly spot on, and is that I think we really need to diversify the people we're around, because ultimately it's a benefit to both parties, in all honesty, because it's kind of like, it's the inevitable. It's like we talked about earlier. I was like, it's like, what do you guys think of Siri and everyone else listening to everything you say? And it's like, part of the conversation was like, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. And so back to this conversation, it's like, diversity is inevitable. It might be painful, right? Like, but it is this unity that is happening is happening. So be a part of it now versus being so resistant to it, because it is going to happen. It is taking over. This love fest that is happening is happening. There are too many people who are loving and caring and thoughtful and educational seeking people who like say, this is a people, like this is a person. Like there are plenty of people who are white that I just don't like, right? Like, but there are plenty of people who are colored that I do like. And so that to me is a very simplistic children understand that. So it can be taught. And I think exactly to your point is just like, how do we educate and it kind of comes down to like, you and I were talking about going to school and going to college, and it's like, what if more kids travel? What if more kids took more field trips, less to historic, places, and more to, I wrote down on my paper, and I think it's correct, is the Stanford prison experiments, where, and I've been a participant of this at a chiropractic event that I went to. It's like, stand across from somebody and ask a series of questions while looking them in the eyes. And when you're asked a question, you move closer to the line, or you have similarities, you move closer to the line. If you haven't experienced this, you move further away. And you realize how much similarities that you actually have in common when you go through these 50 questions or 30 questions or whatever. And I think more people need that because when I drive Uber, I'm realizing like I've got a lot of common with some of these people. I can learn from a lot of these people. Someone coming in and looking a certain way, I've been, taught to judge, right? That I have to unlearn this judgment in my eyes. That when people come in, I have to understand. Like I have to take down those. I want to call them walls, right? Those goggles. I want to take off those goggles, those judgment goggles, those filter goggles that say life should be this way, and just say, how can I learn from this person? How can I just be open-minded and find a way to connect as fast as possible. So I think connection is definitely something that people really need right now, and I think that's great advice. So what would be one thing as we wrap up here, so I can take the kids to go get some ice cream, like I said, and Nicole's now home from her wedding shoot, and it's been a great podcast. What's one piece of advice on top of that? Like, just give us some parting words, Heath.
Yeah, I would say overall, like when you're looking at like coming out and stuff like that, obviously do it on your own do it on your own time. Do it when you're ready, because you're never going to, like, it is your experience and it's your life to build into what you are, but also surround yourself with the people who are going to be able to be emotionally intelligent in regards to yourself and being accepting of who you are. You truly do get to know people by the things that you get to go through and the hardships that you face, and seeing how those people react to those situations. Like when you go through something very difficult, who are the people there for you? And that doesn't mean that other people don't have their own things going on too, but you want to make sure that who's going to be there for you at all times of the day. Like obviously, like I've seen this quarantine meme where it's like, oh, if you're not talking to people now, like you're a bad friend. That's not true. People are going through their own things. Like we're all going through quarantine right now. So like people are struggling with that in different ways. So just because this person doesn't reach out to you and make sure that you're okay, that doesn't mean that they don't care about you. So kind of like really taking into consideration of like, okay, even just this person not connecting with me right now, like doesn't mean that they don't care about me in this type of way. And so like, I don't know, it's kind of a hodgepodge of a mess there, but I think like just understanding and owning up and being ready to do it on your own terms is vital. It's so important to do it when you are ready, and to surround yourself with people who are going to accept you as you are, and be willing to, like you say, come out of just who you are and being your own front self. There is in the show Love, Victor, I just watched that. There is a character in there who or the main character asks this gay man or this queer man, I'll say, and he's like, why do you put on all that makeup now, and like, do you feel like that's like do you feel like you have to do that, or do you feel like you're putting on a mask when you do that? And the character shows him a picture of him back in high school with his religious parents, and he's in like a dress shirt and tie, and he's like, no, that's a mask. That was a mask, and that wasn't who I am, and now I can finally live, because he's like, this is who I want to be, and this is me expressing myself. And that was actually a really, really powerful moment in the show, I thought, and a good realization for the main character, who is working on himself as well. So being willing to come out and be who you are, regardless of what that is. And so trying to express that, and also spreading that positivity around too, like making sure that if you go through that experience, you're also open to other people talking to you about your experience, and the willingness to open up and be there for someone else who's also going through that experience. So
I love it, man. And to wrap up this episode of the Kill Mark podcast, I'm going to steal a question from my buddy Chris, who runs the No Quit Living podcast. And it is, if you could go to dinner with any person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. That's a hard question. I've heard this so many times before in my life, and I never actually have an answer. It's almost like, do I want someone who is like entertaining, or do I want like some influential person? Honestly, at this point, I think this is going to get a little sentimental, is I just saw a picture of Granny Barb yesterday, and I honestly would probably say I would love to go to dinner with Granny Barb, because she is a character, and she knew my boyfriend at the time, but she did not know we were together, and I would love to see her reaction to and see what that actually looks like, which I know would probably be not that big of a deal because, you know, at the time we also have a sister who is married to a woman. And so, which Granny already knew, but I just think that'd be really fun. And I was very, very close to her. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely who I would pick.
And where would you go?
Taco Bell, obviously.
Yeah. At first in my head, like Taco Bell, 2 a.m. Taco Bell, or my second guess was the Great Dark County Fairgrounds and pushing her wheelchair thing around and
get her two tacos and a nacho supreme.
Oh my gross.
Every time.
Oh, gross. So, all right, well, brother man, I love you very much. Thanks for doing the podcast with me. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, we'll do it again another time. And enjoy your Saturday. And until next time.
Yeah, until next time. Love you.
Love you too. Bye.